All right, 2.4 looks at something very important for algebra and for simplifying expressions. That's called the order of operations. But let's start out with just some really simple examples. So here we have a couple of exponents. So look at the difference between number 1 and 2. So there's an important difference there. So 2 cubed, we've done that. What does that mean? That means take 2 and multiply it by itself 1, 2, 3 times. So 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 again is 8. So that one's easy. What about the next one? So now look at 2 and 3. So there's an important difference between those two, and that's that set of parentheses. Because this first example here, I actually do the exponent before I account for that negative in front. Because this one, I can actually think of this as being like -1 times 2 cubed. That's the same as having that negative in front. So that means first I apply my exponent. So 2 cubed was 8. Then I multiply the result by -1. So my answer there is -8. As opposed to here in 3, this whole quantity is under the exponent because of that parentheses. So this means I actually have to multiply that -2 by itself 3 times. Okay, so do you remember how this worked? So I had -2 times -2. That's negative times a negative is a positive. And then 4 times -2. So 1 positive times 1 negative is a negative. Okay, so look at number 4. So number 4 here is more like number 2, right? This is like the -1 times the 5 squared. So 5 squared is 5 times 5, that's 25. So the result is -25. Versus number 5 is like number 3, where I have the parentheses. That means that whole quantity is squared. So I take that whole quantity and multiply it by itself. A negative times a negative is a positive. And so you can kind of pick up on a pattern. Let's see when we look at these next few. Okay, what about 1 to the 200th? Well, that's easy. That means take 1 and multiply it by itself 200 times, okay? But no matter how many times I multiply 1 by itself, the result is just going to be 1, right? So actually, immediately upon seeing this, I can say, I know the answer. Answer is going to be 1. So now I have some big exponents. So let me think about this. So this one I have that -1, the whole quantity is under the exponent. So that means I have to take -1 and multiply it by itself 200 times. Well, what the heck is going to happen? So notice that this is an even exponent. Okay, so when I multiply, look, -1 times -1 makes +1. -1 times -1 makes +1. -1 times -1 makes +1. So because I have an even exponent here, that means I have an even number of factors. So each of these pairs gives me a +1. So ultimately, don't I have 1 times 1 times 1 times 1, which is just 1. right? Okay, so that even exponent means that the result will be positive. Okay. Like, let me skip 8 for a second and look at number 9. Because number 9 looks very similar, except I have an odd exponent. So I bet you can guess what's going to happen here. Okay, so here I take -1 and multiply it by itself. Well, 201 times. So here I have all these pairs. So that's +1, that's +1. Okay, but once I've got all my pairs, I'm up to 200. Then I have this extra factor of -1 here. So ultimately, I'm multiplying -1 times +1. So the result of this one is actually going to be -1. Okay? So when I have an odd exponent on a negative, that result is going to be negative because I have that extra single factor of negative in there. Eight was kind of the different example, right? This was the one where the negative is actually outside of the exponent. So here I'm just finding 1 to the 200th. That's just 1. And then multiplying it by -1. Okay, so what's next? So those are kind of some simple-ish examples where I'm just looking at exponents. But we have expressions that are a little bit more complicated. We follow the order of operations, and I bet you've seen this before. We kind of think about these letters PEMDAS to tell us kind of generally how to do this process. So we start on the left and we look at what's inside parentheses. Okay, then we look at exponents. Then we look at these guys. We can kind of interchange. These are multiplications and divisions. So assuming I have more than one of those, I can do those in either order. I can do a division first or a multiplication first. But I have to do multiplications and divisions before I do additions and subtractions. Okay, so let me try kind of using that order of operations to see if I can go through some of these examples. So evaluate, in other words, find the value. What is this thing equal to? Okay, so I'm looking at this guy and I'm going, okay, so I'm working kind of from left to right because all I see here is I see a multiplication and then I see here a division. Okay, so those guys go, those guys, I mean, I can do either order, as in I could multiply the -5 and the 2, or I could first do the division over here. But I have to save the addition for last. Okay, so again, I can't do that addition yet because I still have a division. Okay, so what's 32 divided by -4? 8? -8? Okay. Move this down. Okay, and then That's negative 18. Okay, so I can kind of write out some of the things I did. So what did I do in each step? So in this second step here, what did I do? I used thinking about my order of operations up here. So this might be useful. So I have to kind of go, what did I use? Did I look at parentheses? Did I look at exponents? Did I look at multiplications and divisions? Or did I look at additions and subtractions? Okay, so in the second step, what did I do? Well, I did this multiplication, right? So what did I use? I used multiplication division. Okay. And then what did I do in the next step? In the next step, I did another division. So I again used multiplication and division. And then the last step, I went ahead and combined, subtracting those two terms. So now I used addition, subtraction. So I can keep track of what I'm doing in each step. So should I kind of want to copy that? I wonder if I can bring it along here. There we go. That's cool. So we can use that little rule as we go. Okay, so next one. So I don't see any parentheses. So next I'm going to look at the exponent. So 3 squared is 9. What rule did I use in that step? I used exponent. Okay, now I'm going to go, okay, what next? So now I look for multiplications and divisions. So now I see a division, right? 27 divided by 9 is 3. What did I do in that step? In that step, I did multiplication division. And then in the last step, I go ahead and subtract. And so there, I'm doing addition, subtraction. Bringing that along with us. Okay, next one. So let's look inside the parentheses. Okay, so inside the parentheses, well, what do I see? I see 3 minus 5. So 3 minus 5 is negative 2. Negative 3 minus 4 is negative 7. So what did I do in that step? So I looked inside the parentheses. So I'm going to say parentheses, and then I'm going to say, what did I do inside the parentheses? Inside the parentheses, I did addition, subtraction. Okay, so maybe I should do it this way. Maybe I should say, looked inside the parentheses, and inside the parentheses, did addition, subtraction. Okay, so now what next? So now I've taken care of simplifying what's inside the parentheses. So now I go on and I look at the next unit, which is exponents. Okay, so negative 2 quantity squared, that one's negative 2 times negative 2. Positive 4, right? Negative 7 times negative 7 is positive 49. And what did I do in that step? I applied the exponents. Okay, and then looks like we have maybe just one more step. Okay, I have $4, I spend $49. So what am I, $45 in debt? negative 45. And so in that step, I used addition subtraction. Okay, what about number 4? Okay, so first I look inside the parentheses. And then inside the parentheses, I'm really following the same order. So I'm saying, okay, so what is going on inside the parentheses? Well, I have to apply the exponent before I do the subtraction. So in this step, I looked inside the parentheses and I applied the exponent. Okay? Then I continued, I'm still working inside the parentheses. 8 minus 4 is 4. So I can drop that parentheses. Okay, so what did I do in that step? I was still inside the parentheses. I did my addition subtraction. Okay, now parentheses are done. Now I go on to exponents. Okay, this is the one where I have the negative on the outside. So it's 3 squared, which is 9 times negative 1. It's negative 9. 5 squared is 25. Okay, so what did I do in that step? I did apply the exponents. Okay, so next I have to do my division. This one's a little ugly, I guess, huh? Because another way I could write this would be like so. Okay, so 25 is not actually divisible by 4. So how do I then add these together? So actually, you probably remember this from somewhere. I need an LCD. So here, a common denominator. So I actually multiply the 9 there by 4 over 4. So far I'm just simplifying. I haven't actually done my addition yet. So let's see, I multiply straight across. Okay, now that I have a common denominator, so let's see, what did I do in this step? What I did here is I just found an LCD, least common denominator. And we'll do more examples like that later. But that's a little mini refresher. Okay, now I can actually do the addition. So I have negative 36 plus 25. That's the same as 25 minus 36, if you like. So what is that? That is 11, negative 11 over 4. So that one's a little harder, huh? And so in that step, that's where I actually did the addition subtraction. Okay, so a few more of these harder ones. Last one was a little tough though. So let's see, maybe these aren't too bad. So, all right, let's start working inside the parentheses. So the only parentheses that I can actually do anything inside of is the one here on the bottom. So I have to decide, what do I do first? Do I do the exponent or the multiplication? I do the exponent first, right? So 4 squared is 16. So what did I do there? I looked inside the parentheses and I applied the exponent. Okay, now I'm still looking at that parentheses in the denominator. Now I'm going to do my multiplication. So I'm still inside the parentheses. Now looking at the multiplication division. Okay, so still in that parentheses in the denominator. Now I can do the subtraction. Okay, so now I'm inside the parentheses. What did I do? I did the addition subtraction. Okay, now I finally dealt with the parentheses. Now I'm going to look at exponents. Okay, well I have a bunch of those. Okay, so -6 times -6 is 36. 4 times 4 is 16. 4 squared, 16 again. So in that step, I applied the exponents. Okay, now I can go ahead and I don't have any multiplication. Okay, so be careful. So how do I decide what to do next? Because I'm kind of thinking, well, I mean, I'm supposed to do multiplications and divisions before additions and subtractions, but be careful. Because you see how these guys, these two terms are both together in the numerator? So actually when I have items together in the numerator or the denominator, there's an implied parentheses. Okay, that means that I want to combine items or terms that are in the numerator or denominator together before attempting to combine numerator with denominator. So I want to go ahead and do that 36 minus 16. So that'd be 20. Okay, so how would I label that step? I think I'd kind of say, I thought about the implied parentheses and I did addition subtraction. So then I have an answer, but the only thing left is to maybe reduce that fraction. So do you remember how to do that from somewhere? So I go, okay, what are both top and bottom divisible by? 20 is divisible by 4, and so is 16. So that fraction reduces to 5 over 4. So what did I do there? I reduced the fraction. Here's number 6. Okay. So here we have some absolute values. We worked with these. So absolute value bars, we treat those like parentheses. So I want to work first inside the parentheses. So I can go ahead and, well, let me do it this way. I have some options here. Let me go ahead and say, looking inside the parentheses, let me first apply exponents. Okay, because exponents come before multiplications and division. So inside the parentheses, I looked at exponents. Okay, now I'm inside the parentheses, and what do I do next? Inside the parentheses, I do multiplications. Okay. Still inside the parentheses. Now I do my addition subtraction. So 25 minus 8, is that 17? Okay, now I can go ahead and apply my absolute values. Okay, and then in my very last step, I go ahead and do my addition subtraction. Okay, it's our last one. Okay. So let's work inside the brackets there on the bottom. Okay, so let me actually say, okay, so inside of those parentheses, the bracket there, I'm going to apply the exponents. Okay, so -2 times -2, 4. 3 times 3, 9. Okay, so what did I do? Looked inside the parentheses, applied exponents. So now, since I've accounted for, the bracket, I could replace, if I wanted to, the bracket with a parenthesis. It's up to you. Okay, now I still have to look inside that parentheses. Four plus 9, 13. So that was working inside the parentheses still, addition, subtraction. Okay, so now I've accounted for the parentheses, operations I can do inside parentheses. So then I go to exponents. -1 to an even power. So remember that's -1 times -1, and then you have an even number of these. So it's 1 times 1 times 1. This is just 1. Okay, so what did I do in that step? In that step, I applied exponents. Now my multiplication. Now remember, I have an implied parentheses around the top and the bottom. So that means I have to go ahead and combine what's in the numerator and what's in the denominator separately before I do the division. Okay, so what I did in that step, I would call that I have like an implied parentheses, and I did addition subtraction. And then I can just reduce my fraction. Okay, so let's see, these are both divisible by 2, -5/6.